Good afternoon. A lot of faces here today. This is a big lecture hall. So I'm Clark, as Laura told you, and I've been an artist all my life. It's what I grew up doing. My dad was an artist, so I really had no choice. Right? But I still had to rebel against my parents somehow. And my dad was a very technical draftsman. He would paint bridges and churches and scenes from the Midwest. Very beautiful drawings. But I didn't want to go down that path. Right? I still wanted to make art, but I wanted to do a lot of different things that my dad wasn't doing. And when I was your age, when I was a sophomore in college, I decided that I would kind of follow my dad's path and create commercial art and try to make a living doing that. And give you an idea here. So in 2001, 2002, I started a body of artwork using acrylic and colored pencils, Prismacolored pencils specifically. And I created, these paintings of musical instruments, up close, really kind of cropping in, getting the most essential elements of an instrument, and as well as wine and cocktails. And so I did this for 5 years. I traveled around the country from Key West, Florida to Tucson, Minneapolis, and everywhere in between. I was based out of St. Louis, and I had a trailer and a truck, and I drove around. I set up a tent with my booth, and I would sell prints of these for anywhere from $30 to $300. And by the time I was 25, I had sold $1 million worth of artwork. And you can kind of see there, it looks great over your couch, you go in your bar, or whatever, right? But I got really tired of that. I didn't get tired of making money, but I got tired of kind of doing the same thing, not really letting my voice be heard, and I wanted to kind of change that. So I took all this money I'd made and put it in a box and hopped in my car and drove to Brooklyn, New York, from a small town of 400 people, and moved in immediately and started going to grad school. And while I was in grad school, it was in 2008, and while I was doing art fairs, I was traveling around the country also doing graffiti at night, stencil graffiti, and this was definitely inspired by Banksy. I did a semester abroad in London in 2004, and I found myself running all over the streets of London looking for Banksy stencils. And so the first thing I did was a project I came up with kind of in my first week of design class, my freshman year. And that was to take Robert Indiana's Love design and turn it into Vote. When I was 18, it was 2000, and and Al Gore was running against George Bush, and we still don't know who won that election. And it was my first time voting, and I really felt like my vote didn't count. I was, I really kind of concerned about this. So I made these stencils. I printed up over 200,000 of these stickers, shipped them all over the country. And while I was doing the circuit of art fairs at night, I'd go out and tag the town. And then I moved to Brooklyn, and I didn't really have to go far at that point. I had 5 boroughs to work with and millions of people to see it. And that, by the end of 2008, that culminated into gallery shows and several other projects. The following year, I decided, actually November 4th, 2008, I decided to kind of retire from that vote and evolve, move into evolve, like you see here. And so kind of continued that. I did that for 2009 into 2010. You can see it's kind of all over the place. I went and started tagging the words "graffiti keeps me clean." And it was kind of a double entendre, right? If I'm going to go out and do graffiti at night, I'm going to have to be sober. Right? I'm going to have to. I can't have anything on me that, if I got arrested, would cause further troubles. But also, I felt like graffiti was really kind of keeping the city clean. Because of graffiti, walls were getting painted, walls that probably wouldn't get painted. And so it was kind of always a rejuvenation of the city. And so there's that double entendre. And, I did graffiti essentially up until September 17th of 2011. Can anyone tell me what happened on September 17th, 2011? Anybody? No one? In the financial district of Manhattan? Occupy Wall Street happened. And Occupy Wall Street was a project that actually started several years before you ever heard of it. I started working with a group. We called ourselves Occupy Everything. And we were doing all sorts of guerrilla actions in New York City. And we started forming organization meetings to have this actual movement, have a big protest down in front of the stock exchange. And prior to that, I had been actually working on Wall Street. Kind of. I was begging for money. I was busking. I was juggling. But in 2008, right before the election, there was the bailout. Remember the bailouts? Maybe a little bit. So a couple of us, three of us, for 2 years would go down in front of the stock exchange. And here we are, beg for money. I would juggle. One guy would, he would use a pogo stick and play trumpet. And we found that we were making about, amongst the three of us, about $300 a day. Tourists, this is the big trick right here. So this is the trick that was on CNN, C-SPAN, NBC, Wall Street Journal. So it wasn't very long. Actually, it was just a couple hours after we first went out there that the media started reporting us as unemployed finance workers. And this one says, here we go, a former hedge fund employee. A group of unemployed Wall Street employees performed for a crowd outside the New York Stock Exchange. And actually, we were just all in our first semester of grad school in this performance art program. And, but the media, they're not very good at checking facts, and they'll believe just about whatever you tell them. And then that project, we did that for 2 years. But as I'm going to show you, a lot of my work leading up to that dealt with war, especially the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. My brother went to Iraq in 2003. He went for 2 tours. He was kind of like the first in Bagram Air Force Base, or Bagram Airport. And so war definitely was a big thing that weighed a lot on my family and me personally. And kind of having a very distinct, different opinion from my brother about war. So we turned the Bail Us Out project into the Army of Fun. And we went in front of the Times Square Armed Forces Recruiting Center. We painted faces. we did the same tricks, but instead of asking people for money, we were asking people for their children, right? We were asking them to send their children to the Middle East so that they could kill children, right? And that was, and this is the recruiting center here. It's a very famous recruiting center. It's the one that always has bomb attempts on it, and it's right dead center in the middle of Times Square, so it gets a lot of attention. Here we go. And we would also get participants, right? And you're about to see one of our friends show up. There he is. So yeah, with these kind of projects, these street guerrilla theater projects, we definitely had a lot of interaction with the NYPD. Various times, both on Wall Street and in Times Square. And that kind of, I should note, in 2009, I got a cop fired. He pulled a gun out on me. He was beating up his girlfriend. I broke up the fight. The girlfriend jumped in front of the gun, told him he was drunk to put the gun down. And so, because of that, because of all this, the security footage came out. He ended up getting fired, and I decided to join the NYPD. I took the test, I went through the whole process, but a week before I got my acceptance letter into the cadet school, Occupy Wall Street happened. And, well, oh. Yep.
I know that in San Antonio you have to have a license in order to do that. What about New York?
Well, if it's political, satirical in any nature, it's totally legal. It's protected by the First Amendment. But I only know that for New York. So but yeah, no, we never. I'm not one to go get a license. I'll show you what I got a license for in a bit. So let me see. Also, let's see if we can make this bigger. Also in 2008, right before this bail us out, I was documenting the Republican convention and the Democrat convention. And there were two totally different events. They're very, one was very uplifting and exciting. We were about to have Barack Obama become our first black president. On the other hand, we had McCain and Sarah Palin in St. Paul, Minnesota, and it was a total police state. So, let's see, let me pull that up. We're going to just watch the rest of that. So that was now becoming this new part of me, right?
My dear friends, please don't be diverted by the ground noise and the static. That need to be changed. Each generation makes its contribution to our greatness. We We believe in the values of families, neighborhoods, and communities. We believe in a government that unleashes the creativity and initiative of America. I know how the world works. I know the good and evil in it. I know how to work with leaders who share our dreams of a freer, safer, and more prosperous world, and how to stand up to those who don't.
So it was about this point that I realized that the mainstream media that we were watching on television, reading in the news, was never getting the story right. Right? They couldn't even tell people that I was a performance art major and not some stockbroker. This wasn't the story that you were hearing coming out of the Republican convention in 2008. And that's when I realized that I needed to kind of cross this path from being an artist to being a journalist and an activist. And so prior to that point, you know, the work I was doing was kind of wasn't immediate, wasn't about what was going on right now. Give you kind of an idea of things I was doing. I told you my work dealt with war, and I was doing this a lot more abstractly, right? So this was a video. It was actually a 20-hour video I shot of betta fish all in a bowl together, right? And supposedly if they're in a bowl together, they'll fight, right? They're Japanese fighting fish is a term used for them. And I wanted to represent the world as this globe, this bowl, and kind of, you know, how our fascination with fighting, with you know, how we almost kind of view fighting and war as beautiful, right? And this piece is called Alpha Beta, right? It's a beta fish, but it's about these alpha males who just, you know, can't live peaceably together in a contained space or in one space. And then after that, I started working in animation. And this is actually shadows of a chess game. Using two different light sources, one for each side. I hand drew each move of a chess game, so you can see them go towards each other and kind of fight it out. But still very abstract. This is work that was all before I moved to New York. I really got involved in activism and street theater and really getting my voice out there. I was, you know, kind of going for these real kind of abstract, hard to grasp metaphors for war. I felt like these were bullet holes or kind of in a camouflage. And so, and a lot of my work is also collaboration. So this was actually my best friend from college. He and I were doing a lot of different things at that time. From those projects, we moved on to what I call Average World. He was a graphic design major, I was an art major, and we were able to kind of bring our different ideologies and working methods together on this project where I decided that we needed to average every nation's flag, right? So if I did an average blur in Photoshop of the American flag, it would be lavender, right? It's blue and white and red, all comes out to be lavender. And I wanted to start showing world statistics in a very abstract way, but start to see patterns and things like that. So here we've got China, we've got India, we've got the United States. We just saw the USSR become Russia here. And then all these nations, and this is population data. And essentially this entire project, I could not visualize in front of me until it was done. And the way I did it was loading databases into ActionScript in Flash. And this is an ongoing project. I'll be working on this project for the rest of my life as populations change or as any other statistics change. So for example, this next one is Olympic gold medals. And every 4 years I can update it with one more frame. I decided to do the Olympics because I remember that the Olympics always stopped for world wars, and kind of best way to really document or show the kind of the disgust of war in a very objective way is to take all these beautiful colors and wipe them off the screen. All right. So up to kind of up until this point where I moved to New York, it was very abstract. I was still doing the vote, very colorful, but that was the vote project. The vote graffiti was really kind of my door into more activism in art and so forth. So 2010, I was in grad school. And I had to do a thesis project. And I decided to call my thesis Peace, Peace, both spellings. And really kind of do this big project on war and peace. And in doing so, a month before my thesis show came out, which was a 2-hour-long, 2-channel video featuring lots of war video and lots of things that we've seen throughout the past 10 years in Afghanistan and Iraq. Well, on April 5th, 2010, there was a video released by WikiLeaks, or published by WikiLeaks, released by Private First Class Bradley Manning. And how many of you all have seen that video? Know what I'm talking about? Look around. Every one of you should have seen that video by now. It's called Collateral Murder. And it's a video from inside an Apache helicopter, flying around Baghdad, shooting civilians, Reuters journalists, and children. And then the aerial weapons men all kind of laugh about it. And they really don't show any kind of compassion or care for that whatsoever. See if that works. So what I decided to do, I was leaving Brooklyn at this point. I'd been there for 3 years, and I needed someplace bigger to live. I wasn't sure where I was going to be working later that year. So I bought a box truck from U-Haul. And let's get past this. There we go. There it is. The WikiLeaks top secret mobile information collection unit. I painted it up and I started driving it around the White House. around the Capitol, all over D.C., around the Pentagon, CIA. And the first day I had it, within hours, I got pulled over by Secret Service. They told me that my license was suspended, but I assured them that I would definitely not be driving this truck around the White House with a suspended license. It was a weekend, so they decided to take me in anyway, ask me a few questions. 7 hours later, they'd ask me every question they could possibly ask about WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, Bradley Manning, and so on and so forth. None of their questions had anything to do whatsoever with driving or my license. They wanted to know what I was doing, why I was there for. Took it to Fox News, Jon Stewart, and there it is on Wall Street right here. So I brought it down first day of Occupy Wall Street and parked it right along this whole row of media trucks. And kind of stuck out like a sore thumb, but we started a media center there with the same people that I had been working with at the Republican convention. There I am driving it through Times Square. Here they are towing it on the 1-month anniversary of Occupy Wall Street. I just launched a lawsuit against the NYPD for stealing my vehicle. This is
About 30 minutes have passed.
okay. All right, so I'm going to move through this pretty quickly. I got arrested shortly after this. That's part of my lawsuit. They lost the truck for a week. It only made the truck even more famous. It became a meme after that. Here I am in front of the U.S. Capitol with, frequently I have dogs smelling the truck. This summer, I started, 22 months ago, December of 2011, just shortly after Occupy had been evicted. As you see here, I also have expanded the fleet. I have over 30 different vehicles all over the world, RVs, race cars. But what I've been doing for the past 2 years, essentially, is I've been going down to Fort Meade, right there. Did you see that? Fort Meade, Maryland. Home of NSA headquarters. And I've been doing courtroom sketches of Bradley Manning, who is now known as Chelsea Manning. I've been covering the trial. I did over 350 sketches from the trial. And now I'm putting together a book. And that will be coming out in a couple weeks. And the book is essentially a graphic novel. Here we go. Here's the book right there. I can't wait to have it in my hand. And give you a little idea of what it's going to be like. I'm going to have to turn this up. So this was, what you're about to hear is leaked audio from the most secretive trial in U.S. history. All right, you're not allowed to record audio or video. And in February, somehow, somebody in the press room, credentialed journalist, recorded Bradley Manning's statement.
I wrote the statement in confinement. Following facts are provided in support of the province inquiry for my court-martial, United States versus PSC, Bradley E. Manning. Facts regarding the unauthorized forged and disclosure of the 12 July 2007 aerial weapons team failure. The video depicted several individuals being engaged by an aerial weapons team. At first, I did not consider the video very special, as I had viewed countless other war-porn type videos depicting combat. However, the report with audio comments by the aerial weapons team crew and the second engagement in video of an unarmed Congo truck troubled me. It was clear to me that the event happened because the aerial weapons team mistakenly identified various employees as a potential threat, and that the people in the Congo truck were merely attempting to assist the wounded. The people in the van were not a threat, but merely good Samaritans. The most alarming aspect of the video to me, however, was the seemingly delightful bloodlust the aerial weapons they appeared to have. They dehumanized the individuals they were engaging and seemed to not value human life by referring to them as, quote, dead bastards, unquote, and congratulating each other on the ability to kill in large numbers. I learned from the video, there's an individual on the ground attempting to crawl to safety. The individual is seriously wounded. Instead of calling for medical attention to the location, one of the air weapons team crew members verbally asked for the wounded person to pick up the weapon so that he can have a reason to engage. For me, this seems similar to a child torturing hands with a magnifying glass. Shortly after the second engagement, a mechanized infantry unit arrives at the scene. Within minutes, the air weapons team crew learns that children are in the van, and despite the injuries, the crew exhibits no remorse. Instead, they downplay the significance of their actions, saying, it's their fault for bringing their kids into a battle, unquote. For me, it's all a big mess, and I'm left wondering what these things mean, and how it all fits together, and it brings me emotional.
Bradley was sentenced to 35 years. He narrowly escaped getting life in prison for aiding the enemy, treason, which is kind of the worst charge anyone could be charged with. But we found out in his trial that absolutely nothing that he released caused any harm whatsoever to national security, to anyone working for the government in any way. But what he did do was he ended the Iraq War single-handedly with the click of a mouse. And he did that because what had happened after this was published in 2010 was Nouri al-Maliki, the new president or prime minister of Iraq, said that U.S. troops no longer had legal immunity to commit war crimes in Iraq anymore. They couldn't do it. And January 1st, 2012, Barack Obama had no choice but to bring the troops home from Iraq, all because of Bradley Manning. You don't hear about that in the news in America, but the rest of the world knows it. And so that's where I'm at today. I've talked your ear off, and I'd be open to taking questions about anything. And yeah, and there's a live left out, so you might inspire. Yeah, my life is threatened like constantly. It's just, I mean, this summer I was living just a couple miles from NSA headquarters. I was driving there every day with this truck, and I was getting death threats sent to me anonymously via email. Death threats being left under my windshield wipers. Those are all cowards, and I'm not going to let somebody, I had a NYPD off-duty cop holding a gun to my head. And after that, everything just seemed kind of nonchalant. Nothing really worried me after that. And I really lost my fear of death. After that point, kind of like that scene in Fight Club where he takes the store manager out and holds a gun to his head. At that point, my fear wasn't death, my fear was not living. And so I try to live my life to the fullest every day. And I try to make sure that every day that I'm here, that I'm having the most impact I can, both on our culture, on our society, on our laws, on our government. And that's what keeps me going. Because, whatever I can do, like my goal this past 2 years was to make sure that the public knew who Bradley Manning was and to fight to get him out of jail. So whatever it is, it's much bigger than worrying about my safety or my health or my life. So, I just kind of, I've gotten enough death threats that they make me laugh. I don't even go to the police. Have you all heard about, there was a biker gang in New York on the West Side Highway. They pulled out a guy and beat him up a couple weeks ago, right? You might have seen that on the news. Well, last week, one of the undercover cops that was involved in the situation turned himself in. And while he was turning himself in, a group that I work with, I do a lot of research on things that are totally unrelated to art. I doxed, as you could say, this undercover cop's online identity. And before he even made it out of the courtroom, I had testimony from various people in the Occupy Wall Street movement saying that this guy had worked as a undercover in the movement, was going to their birthday parties, was dating them, even though supposedly he had a wife and kids. So I ruined this guy's life before he even got out of jail. Right? I was able to find all of his online identities, which led me to like a photo bucket page, which had all these horrible photos of his girlfriends, and within an hour after him getting home, all of that was erased by him. But yeah, I had saved it all and was able to take it to the media. So I kind of, they view me as a threat, but I can't really view them as a threat. In fact, this summer I was kicked out of the courtroom where I was doing these sketches. I was banned from Fort Meade Base because I tweeted. I tweet from my handle WikiLeaks Truck. I tweeted the actual location of where the prosecution was staying, the hotel where they were staying. I showed up to court the next day, and the big armed guards hauled me away and never let me back on, which ended up resulting in me writing letters to both the judge and the base commander, essentially telling them that the lead prosecutor in the most highly secretive case that regarding information security and assurance and classified information was publicly open about where he was staying throughout the trial. And the fact that this guy who drives this WikiLeaks truck knows where they were staying wasn't my fault. It was a security breach by the government. And so by the time we're getting around to sentencing, the judge knows, the defense knows, all the prosecution knows that they messed up. And it wasn't something that I did. And it looked really bad for them. It was a real kind of black eye. They had to move hotels. If there, and they viewed that as a threat, that me releasing that information. So I guess I'm not worried about them threatening me. They're more worried about me threatening them. So that's kind of how I like to have the upper hand with the government. I saw some other hands, but yeah.
You said your brother's in the military. How does he feel about all the work that you've got going on?
So my brother and I don't talk. So after he served 2 tours in Iraq, he ended up working for all these military contractors, Northrop Grumman, Blackwater, Harris. And the last time we saw each other was for 3 days over Christmas. And he got back to work the next week, and his boss brought him in for like a 2-hour interrogation about me. So we are totally opposite ends of the spectrum, but we still respect each other like brothers should. But yeah, we I don't know. We have different fathers. Next question. Yeah.
How did you start selling your art?
Well, I was very lucky because my dad was selling his art. He had a gallery in a small town where I grew up, and he also was doing these outdoor art festivals. So I had seen this model of how it could work. But essentially, I put together a body of work of about 30 drawings, found a printer who could do them, print editions of them really cheap. And then I started researching the shows that I would go to. I went and wrote a business plan, took that to the bank. They gave me a huge loan. By halfway through the year, I paid off that loan, and now I was starting to put that money back into my business. That's the short answer. I could teach a whole semester on how to start your own art business. And don't let anyone ever tell you that your work is too commercial or you shouldn't go down that route. Because I couldn't have done all these other projects I told you about if I hadn't sold tons and tons of art for cash on the street. All right, cash is king. Remember that. All right, you don't have to pay taxes on it. Am I still being recorded? All right. Next question. Let's got one. Anyone else? Yes.
So how do you continue to make money on that line of art, or do you take donations now, or how do you make money with this new art?
That's top secret. So, I've been very lucky to be able to transition from a commercial artist into an activist artist who's actually making money doing it. Remember me driving through Times Square? Well, Julian Assange saw that on a live stream, called me the next day, and he said, I'm very thankful for the work you're doing, and I want to keep you on the road. And so, I've been able to get some help through WikiLeaks and their friends. I signed a book deal. I also was kind of the head of art and sign making for the Bradley Manning Support Network. That paid me through the trial. And then I have donation pages on my Twitter and my website, and I get donations mostly from people from outside the United States. And it keeps me going, and I teach. So, I'm not a starving artist by any means. But it's not the same kind of it's not as lucrative as the cash on the street for the prints, right? So I always have that to fall back on if I ever need to. See, yes? I teach at Bloomfield College in New Jersey. Bloomfield is a small kind of town just north of Newark, New Jersey. You might have heard of Cory Booker. You might have heard that Newark was ranked this summer as the world's most unfriendliest city, just ahead of Islamabad, Pakistan. I love it in Newark. Newark is an amazing place because it's got so much potential. There's empty buildings everywhere. I live in 20,000 square foot warehouse. We can skateboard on it. We can throw footballs in it. We have a bar and a huge projection screen. So it's kind of the greatest place I've ever lived, with an amazing view of the city. But it's also seriously one of the most crime-ridden places in America. And the poverty and everything is it's pretty striking. But that kind of keeps me alive. I like that. And I lived in Brooklyn and in a space about the size of this table and paid twice as much. So I'm never going back to Brooklyn. Yeah.
Next after the book comes out.
Oh God. This is what I've been asking myself for a few months now. I'm really going to focus on teaching. This trial's not over, so there will be a second edition of the book. The first edition is going to be 200 pages. I've cut 300 pages already, so a 500-page book is going to come out, and then there's appeals for this trial, and those will take about a year or two. So I'll be working on that. And I'm going to continue activism and art with WikiLeaks, but I don't know specifically what my next big project is. I've got a couple things kind of in the works, and I do a lot of side projects all the time. I work with a group called the Yes Men. Anyone heard of the Yes Men? Yeah, look them up, because these guys are changing the world with art, and they're doing it with graphic design. They're building websites, and they're getting called to speak at these conferences and pretend to be these different characters, and they're knocking off millions of dollars off stock prices or stock value of corrupt corporations. And so look them up. Yes Men, they've got 2 movies out. Yes Men Fix the World. These guys are really, my biggest inspiration right now. Yep.
So as you've mentioned, Lloyd, we don't have a really good view of our government based on...
You speak up. You got to speak up in a revolution.
So you said that we don't really have a good view of what is really going on in our government. So what advice would you give to us as students to really find out what's going on? Because we can't just travel to other countries and see their perspective. So what advice would you give us to find what's really going on?
So I would start with reading up on your history. And if I could recommend one book that you read, it's People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. All right, this book changed my life. It's changed a lot of people's life. It's not the history book that you were taught in high school. And it might not even be the history book that you'll be taught in college. It's the real history. So once you get that background, then you know what to start looking for. and realizing that we're being manipulated by the media and the government. Next, we are now living in a time where news media is not as traditional as it used to be. 2-minute warning. All right, real quick. You need to find, alternative forms of media. Best example right now I can tell you is democracynow.org. It's syndicated, but it's also on their website. Amy Goodman puts together the best hour of news anywhere. And she'll tell you what's going on all around the world, especially about corruption in governments. One last question.
When you were driving the WikiLeaks van and you get into this trial of Bradley Manning, how did you do that? How did you get in to even do drawing?
Right. So initially I started showing up as public and sitting right behind Bradley. And I realized that there was no mainstream media covering the trial. And it was just a handful of independent journalists working for blogs. The New York Times, which published all of these leaks that Bradley released, they weren't even showing up. So, and no one was depicting it. It was a closed trial. You really couldn't do it. So I decided, that I needed to become credentialed. So I called up Julian Assange, and I said, I need a media organization to vouch for me. And at the time, he was living with Vaughn Smith, the founder of Frontline Club in London, which is all war reporters, frontline war reporters. And I got them to vouch for me, and they sent a letter to the Pentagon. The Pentagon asked for my license plate and make and model of my vehicle, and that was it. And when they said that was okay, then I just brought the truck on base and got to sit in the jury box, got to sit in the media room, which is just like this, with a big screen. But I'm never allowed back on that base again. So.
We are unfortunately out of time.
Well, thank you. You've been great.